Hey Bills Mafia, Maddy Glab here alongside Bills insider Chris Brown, and we are counting down to training camp. We can't believe week 1 is just a couple months away. We're looking at some of the biggest storylines, and one of them is definitely a big question for this team. Super Bowl or bust? And we're not going to relive it all because we know those memories are still haunting us a little bit from what happened last season. But the Bills suffered that heartbreaking overtime loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, 42-36 in the divisional round. And thankfully, there's new overtime rules this season. And hopefully that loss won't haunt us for too much longer because of how successful this group was last year. Let's take a look at 2022. There's big expectations for this team because of what they did last season. So first off, explain why these expectations keep getting higher and higher for this team.
Well, I think it's because a lot of people on the outside looking in saw a football team that was clearly playing its best football at the end of the season. They were a healthy team, and I don't think there was any other team playing more consistently than them. It's just they were victimized by an overtime situation on a coin flip and then didn't have a defense to stop them, at the most crucial time of the game. But I think dollars to donuts, most people felt, hey, that was the best team in football last year. They just ran into an unfortunate set of circumstances. That's number one. Number two, the roster, you could argue, is even stronger than the one they put together last year. They addressed one of the few weaknesses on the team, the pass rush, by getting one of the best pass rushers of a generation in Von Miller, and they fortified their defensive interior with players that you could argue are even more athletic and more playmaking in nature than the ones they had last season. So those are just two small reasons, not to mention their top two draft choices in Kyer Elam and James Cook, who are expected to be on the field early.
One thing that plays into potential and expectations of a team is who's on their schedule and who's in their conference. With the way that it's stacked, do you think the Bills have the opportunity at the number 1 seed? Because this is something we've heard general manager Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott talk about. Number 1 is being that number 1 seed, having the playoffs run through Buffalo. So with the way that you look at the schedule, with the way the teams are competing in the conference, or that we anticipate these teams will compete in the conference this season, do you think the opportunity is on the table and for the taking?
Yeah, I think the opportunity is most certainly there. The first 7 games are a bear. That's going to be a tough stretch right from the jump. You got Rams, Titans, Ravens, Steelers, Browns, Packers. They're all mashed in there in the first 7 games. You come out of that 5-2 or even 4-3, which I know sounds strange to Bill. Hey, I thought, come on, we're not running the table? What's going on? No, I mean, you come out of that gauntlet 4-3, 5-2, you really are sitting pretty on the back half of your schedule because it gets considerably easier after that. That's number 1. So that you get over that hump, you're in really good shape. But their division is still one that's in transition, Maddy. The Dolphins, the Jets, and the Patriots, they're just not in Buffalo's class. You could argue Miami has closed the gap, but they're still not there yet. The Jets are still rebuilding, even though they did some nice things in the offseason. So the Bills should win the division.
Yep.
So that's step number one. But yes, you've got to rack up wins when you can get them, particularly against AFC opponents. And it looks like the Titans have slid back to the pack. The Steelers have a muddled quarterback situation. KC is in a loaded division where they're going to probably beat up on each other a lot, and you can argue they've taken a step back by trading away Tyreek Hill. So there are a lot of reasons to believe the Bills could very well put themselves in the driver's seat this year for the postseason.
Yeah, it's just tough to look at those first 6-7 games and think, how do they make it out of this alive? Because every team needs a little bit of that warm-up, but they're not going to get that warm-up. And maybe this team doesn't even need a warm-up because of how many seasons several guys have been together and the added firepower in players like Von Miller. So we'll have to see how they start in those first few weeks. But as we consider all of this and put it all together, do we think this is a Super Bowl caliber team in 2022 with the pieces they have and the schedule that they're going to play?
Yeah, I mean, you got to play who you got to play. It's what are you made of? And I think this is a roster that, as we said, is probably even stronger than the one they had last year. I think it's deeper, and I think it's more talented, particularly in their defensive front. And then you look at how they've retooled their offensive line. I think they've made a point to be a little bit more mobile. I think new offensive line coach Aaron Kromer is going to want to employ different blocking schemes through the course of the season, maybe from a week-to-week basis. So you need some players that have some mobility so you can execute more stuff out on the edges, where you can take advantage of the speed that you now have on the offensive side of the ball. And I think also, Maddy, this is a team that has been battle-tested. They've had to endure some very hard playoff lessons each of the last 3 seasons, as we have witnessed. And I think because of that, there is an added motivation, a bigger chip on your shoulder, whatever cliche you want to use. There is a burning desire to finally get over the hump. So you roll that into all the talent they can put out there on the field. Yes, they're a Super Bowl caliber team.
Yeah, I have no problem saying that I expect this team to be in the Super Bowl in the 2022 season. They know what it's like to be in those big games, like you said. They've suffered those losses, and every year that chip keeps getting bigger and bigger. And after the last few seasons, I think Super Bowl is just the natural next step. It's a little crazy to say natural next step,
right,
but they've been there. They've done that. They haven't been to the Super Bowl yet, and I think that's how this team can take the next step, and I think a lot of us are expecting that for the Bills this season. All right, for more videos and content as we continue to count down to Bills training camp in Rochester, head to BuffaloBills.com. For Chris Brown, I'm Maddy Glab.